Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Rhino and in today's video I have 3 replays for you in the brand new Object 780, which is the premium tier 10 Soviet heavy tank that you can get as the level 100 reward for the Allegiance season, and you can get this tank if you have either the standard or the ultimate season pass. And a lot of people have found it quite underwhelming from what I've been viewing on people's streams and the different talk on the social media around this tank, but I think it's actually quite a good support sniping heavy. The gun is actually very nice, it behaves very well for me, it seems to really chunk off your opponents with your fantastic alpha damage of 530. And yeah, I think it's been treating me well, I really enjoy it. You don't want to get stuck into a situation where you're fighting multiple enemies at once because the armour does become weaker, but when they are frontally onto you and you're using your 7 degrees of gun depression, it really does become one of those fortress tanks that's hard to dig out unless artillery starts dumping on you. But we're going to go over a few of the stats of the Object 780 and why I think it's quite a good tank and is actually reasonably well balanced for once, not overpowered like the M47 Iron Arnie that I did a review of yesterday as I'm making this review. I'll show you my commander and equipment setup, we'll talk a little bit about the armour, and I'll show you some weak points on screen with some images that will pop up, and then we'll get talking about how I like to play this tank and the gameplay in the background. So whilst you're watching me go to the hilltop fort here on Raseiniai, I believe it's Raseiniai, I always forget the name of this map, we're going to try and put the 7 degrees of gun depression to work on these ridge lines and see if we can start chunking down the opponents with our reasonable DPM. So the Object 780, like I said, is a tier 10 Soviet heavy tank. It has a 130mm gun, and as a large caliber gun it does have a very nice alpha damage. You have 530 alpha damage on your standard AP and your premium APCR rounds, and 640 alpha damage if you choose to use the HE rounds. The penetration, pretty damn good on the standard AP rounds at 267mm. It does suffer in comparison to a lot of other heavy tier 10 heavy tanks, I should say. It's got 311 APCR premium penetration, so it does struggle a little bit when it comes up against these super heavies, especially from sort of mid to long ranges. And the HE penetration is not too bad at 65mm. Always carry a couple for the artillery now that they've had their hit points boosted. It's just a yummy treat at the end of the game. One thing I really like about this 130mm gun is the shell velocity on the standard rounds. For AP, 1130 meters a second is really, really nice, but if you want that extra shell velocity for sniping at mid to long ranges, you can use the premium APCR rounds, which have 1480 meters a second shell velocity, and that's really good for sniping. You don't have to give too much lead at all, and yeah, you can let the gun sing and really chunk your opponent's health down. And the shell velocity on the HE rounds is 930 meters a second. In terms of the mobility of the Object 780, I think it's pretty reasonable. It's nothing great, it's definitely not one of the worst heavy tanks at tier 10. You have a top forward speed of 45 kilometers an hour. You can go 15 kilometers an hour in reverse, which is the real killer. The power to weight ratio is actually quite good at 17.47. That's with my commander and equipment setup applied, which I'll show you in just a little bit. But that's enough to get to where you need to be, especially if you're playing that supporting role, supporting your heavy tanks and go into the heavy tank flank and putting your gun to work. You can boost that with the mobility equipment, but I've chosen to make the gun as good as it can be, and I'll tell you how I did that in just a little bit. In terms of the hit points, you have 2,200 hit points, so not as good as it could be for a tier 10 heavy tank, but more than enough to take a few rounds. And as you're going to be playing that sort of sniping support role, or a heavy tank support role I should say, you should try and avoid getting hit at all times, but your armour can keep you in the game. It's not fantastic and it can't be relied on, but I'll show you why it's pretty damn good in just a little bit. In terms of the view range, I'll tell you what my updated view range is with my commander and equipment setup a little later on. It's just below 500 and it's very good for spotting for itself. And now let's talk a little bit about the armour, and I'll put some images up as I'm talking on screen for you so you can see what I'm talking about. So if you are looking at the Object 780 and it's not angling at all and you're looking at it dead in the gun and it's pointing at you, Due to the extreme angling on the upper and lower plate, so the upper plate is angled at 70 degrees if you're roughly the same height, and the lower plate at 60 degrees. The upper plate will be an auto ricochet angle if you're kind of the same height, so do watch out for that. And on the lower plate, it's going to be very difficult to penetrate as well for low penetration rounds, and especially if you don't have heat rounds to use to go through this armour. To go through the lower plate with AP, you'll need around 286mm of penetration to go through, and with APCR around 280 to 300mm with APCR, and that's when it's not angling at all. Heat of around 330mm or more has a good chance to butter the front of this tank very well. That's the upper plate and lower plate. But the key weak points are the middle cupola, which you'll need around 230mm of pen to go through reliably. And when it's angled, it does expose very weak sloped corners of the hull, and you need around sort of 240 to 270mm of penetration to go through them, which it becomes weak when you're fighting multiple enemies at once. But when you are being sort of face hugged or you're looking directly at your opponent, your upper plate and your hull are very strong indeed. And if you're using the full extent of your 7 degrees of gun depression, then you can definitely be a very good fortress on a ridgeline, and it has enough armor to keep you in the game. If you're not brawling and being the first one there, and you're just supporting your heavy tanks and playing that kind of hybrid heavy sort of medium / light heavy tank role, if that makes sense, heavium if you will, then you should be golden in this tank, and it's a very good support tank, a little bit like an Object 277. One thing to note about this tank and the armour is that you can't penetrate it through the drive wheel because the hull doesn't go over the tracks. So if you're looking at this tank from the side, you just can't pen it and track it in place. You can track it in place, blow off the tracks, but you can't damage it at the same time. So definitely watch out for that if you're trying to do that. But that's it for the talk on the armour of the Object 780. What commander and equipment setup do I run as you're watching the second gameplay here on Sand River? Well, in terms of my equipment, I run gun stabilizer, advanced loader and improved ventilation. And in terms of my commander, I run 6th Sense, Born Leader, rapid loading, steady aim, rapid aim, snapshot, clutch braking, track mechanic and situational awareness. So in terms of my equipment, I'm running the gun stabilizer to make the accuracy a little bit better. In terms of the advanced loader, that's obvious for the DPM, and ventilation because I want to improve my view range, I want to improve the DPM and the gun handling and everything about the tank. With my commander skills, lots of gun handling skills, clutch braking to help me get my arm around to where it needs to be and improve the whole traverse on this tank, track mechanic to keep my tracks on so I can keep my armor angled, and situational awareness because I want to make use of the view range of this tank and be able to spot for myself and play kind of like a hybrid medium tank heavy tank role. If you do choose to use the exact same loadout as me or one similar, you'll be looking at having a 488 meters view range, which is just good enough to be able to spot for yourself, and that's using combat rations. As you can see, I use that as my third premium consumable. And with this 130mm gun, you'll now have a 1.72 second aim time, 0.28 accuracy, a 9.95 second reload for that lovely 530 alpha damage, and your DPM will have gone up to 3196, so not bad at all for a large caliber gun. And also I'll have roughly a 37 degree a second hull and turret rotation speed, so that's more than enough to keep my sort of gun round on tanks that are trying to circle me, and to get my armour around to people that are shooting me and keep them frontally facing and not expose my weak slow back sides of my upper plate of the hull. Some few facts of the Object 780 for you just to sort of compare to the other tier 10 heavy tanks and premium tier 10 heavy tanks. Of all the tier 10 heavy tanks in the game, of which there are 32, if you don't count the duplicate, which is the Valor and the T95, I've just put that as one tank. It's 22nd out of 32 in terms of its DPM. In terms of all tier 10 heavy tanks aim time, it's 4 out of 32, so it's a very good aim time in comparison to all of the heavy tanks at tier 10. In terms of all tier 10 heavy tanks and the accuracy, it's 6 out of 32, so you're starting to get the picture that this is a very good very well behaved gun, I should say, for a 130mm gun, and it's unusual to have sort of that good gun handling on a higher caliber gun. In terms of all premium tier 10 heavy tanks that you are able to get in the game, it's number 5 out of 7 in terms of its DPM, so it does suffer in terms of its DPM, but the main highlight of this tank is the accuracy aim time, the high alpha damage, a little bit of armor to keep you in the game, and your ability to be a support heavy tank. And when you play it like that, I think it becomes a lot more enjoyable. If you try and go too far forwards, try and brawl too much, the armor will let you down and it won't be as enjoyable. But when you're sort of playing at these kind of mid-range engagements like I'm doing here on Sand River, then you'll find the armor can be very useful and you have time to move your hull around and your turret around to point the strongest parts of your tank at the enemy. In terms of the accuracy, it has the joint best accuracy of all premium tier 10 heavy tanks. Again, just reiterating the point that this is a very well behaved gun, but that's enough talking about the Object 780. We're now sort of nearing the end of the second gameplay, and we're here on Sand River. We've picked up 4.8k damage, 1.8k assistance, and we've blocked 400, and well, I was going to say 430, now 830 damage, so showing you that you can block some shots in this game, and you can see here that the penetration is working well for us on the standard rounds. You carry plenty rounds of ammunition to keep you going in the game. You have 40 rounds, and with this DPM you shouldn't run out at all unless it's a really drawn out game. And here on Sand River we are now 2 tanks up. I'm feeling very confident, and I'm just trying to advance, trying to be clever with my advancing tactics, using the ridge lines, making the low profile nature of this heavy tank, putting it to good use and getting into positions where I can go hold down and use 7 degrees of gun depression, which is pretty good for a Soviet heavy tank. 7 degrees isn't fantastic, but it's definitely more than enough to use on multiple ridgelines in the game. And if you are using the full extent of your 7 degrees of gun depression, it is a real monster, as I showed you earlier when we were talking about the armor. But right now it's 4 against 4, so this game's looking really close. I only have 1,100 hit points left, but I'm just going to bait this T125 around this ridgeline. I'm always trying to keep my turret and the front of my armor angled to where I believe the next tank is going to be firing, and that's just Object 780 101 basically. You're keeping your frontal hull and your turret towards your enemy. You're not going to be the first one there brawling. Because of your DPM, you'll get ripped to shreds by some other heavy tanks, especially things like the T125. They're going to absolutely rip you to shreds. So yeah, be that supporting tank, use your alpha damage, finish off low health targets, and absolutely chunk the living hell out of your enemy. And I find it really enjoyable. I think it's quite a nice reward. It hasn't been in PC World of Tanks for too long, so it's really nice to see it in World of Tanks console, and I don't think it's too bad of a level 100 reward, but I know a lot of people are probably just going to go straight for that M47 Iron Arnie for multiple reasons. Number one being that it's basically OP, borderline OP, very powerful indeed. This one doesn't look as good in comparison to that, but when you're thinking of the holistic nature of the game, it's actually a pretty good heavy tank. So we managed to dig in there using the support of our allies, and we are now 4 against 1, so we should be able to take this one out of the game. I'm just using this dead wreck to try and bounce a shell, which we do from the enemy striker. We snap a shell in there, showing the good gun handling of the Object 780. And now it's just a race to get that last bit of damage, and the Jagdpanther 2 on our team takes out the striker. And that's a win for us in the second game here on Sand River. We finish in 3rd place on our team with 5.8k direct damage, 1.8k assistance, 3 kills and 1.2k blocked, with a nice profit as well. One thing to note about the Object 780 is that you do have a 5% tank XP bonus, so you're doing a little bit of XP, but you don't have a silver bonus or anything like that. It purely is just one of those collector's tanks, one that you play to mark or one that you play because you enjoy it. And I think quite a lot of people will end up enjoying this tank after they've given it a bit of time and played it a little bit differently. So we're going to head on now into the last game. This is going to be my highest damage game in the Object 780 so far. It's not going to be a great ending. Spoiler alert now, it's going to be a little bit of a heartbreak. I make a bit of a misplay, and the buff to the artillery actually is the reason for me being taken down in this game, and you'll see why right at the very end. I could have very easily taken this one down for my team, but I'll admit it, I choked a little bit. I completely forgot that the artillery now has stupid amount of hit points, and they're able to snapshots over rocks. I'm definitely not salty. I'm just telling you what it is, but we're going to head on into position here on Dukla Pass. You can see here that we are sort of racing a front of quite a few heavy tanks, especially things like the Type 5 Heavy, so I don't feel the need to improve the mobility of the Object 780 any more than it already has. The gun handling skills improve the turret traverse, and I like use clutch braking on the commander skills just to help out with the whole traverse, but apart from that I feel the mobility is fine. It's really trying to make this gun as accurate, as well behaved as possible, and improving your DPM as much as possible. I always run the combat rations like I said in the last replay, and I run a premium repair and a premium medkit as well, because God knows I'm going to need them when artillery is going to be raining hell upon you very quickly indeed with its new improved reload but reduced alpha damage. So we've come here on the 9-0 line here on Dukla Pass, and we're just going to be a little bit hesitant here on this ridge line. I'm relatively comfortable sitting here because I know I'm hold down and they haven't got much to shoot at at all. When you are hold down with the 7 degrees of gun depression, you don't show much of your middle cupola at all for the enemies to shoot at, so that's one positive. But there are 2 SPGs or 2 artillery per game, well, in this game I should say, so I'm a little bit wary to sit in one position for too long because I will be absolutely wrecked. This is a little bit of a choke point on this map, and sometimes you need one player to make that push to make it all happen. We need to create a crossfire because at the moment we have like 3, 4, 5 tanks facing one enemy, and with this tank and the mobility it has and the armour, you're able to get around, get into position, create a crossfire, sit a little bit further back from your sort of super heavies and your heavy tanks that are brawling, like I'm going to do now, and then hopefully we're going to be able to put some side shots into the enemy tanks. But we get one shot, or we take one shot there as we cross, but I'm willing to do that to get into this position, which is a really nice hold down position for a tank with this kind of armour. We got that lovely rock, which is the perfect height for us to sort of hide our tracks there, and all they have is our extremely well angled 70-degree angled upper plate and our turret, and the enemy heavy tank just ricocheted straight off that. So we've already bounced 390 I should say, and we've got 545 of our own damage, and we're just going to sit in this position, wait for shots. I'm always constantly looking around to see who might be the next threat. I know there's a medium to my left that might pop out and get a shot into me, but if he does risk getting absolutely annihilated by the tank destroyers and heavy tanks behind me. So I'm going to push up one more rock, and it's all about creating these crossfires, playing this support kind of role, using distractions of your heavy tanks to get shots in. And because you don't have the absolute best DPM, you use hard cover, make sure you go hold down, try and preserve your hit points as long as possible whilst you are reloading, and choose your next target wisely. With this 530 alpha damage, you really don't have to do too many shots to do a reasonable game. Like, I've now done 1.6k damage in, what was it, 3 or 4 shots. So this is a good tank for even a newer player to practice playing a supporting heavy tank role, where you don't have to be the first one brawling and know everything about the enemy tanks. You can sit back, use the penetration, the shell velocity, use the armor that you can use with the 7 degrees of gun depression, and just chunk your opponents down slowly, and learn the different positions on the map where you are able to use 7 degrees of gun depression. And that's how I like to play this tank. It's a little bit like the Object 277, the other Soviet tier 10 Tech 3 heavy tank. The armour isn't as reliable, especially when you are fighting multiple targets at once because of those sloped back corners of the hull, but the gun is a very big calibre indeed, and the alpha damage is better than the 277. It's better than things like the IS-7 and the Object 260, the other tier 10 premium Soviet heavy tanks. So the alpha damage is one of the massive sort of key elements of this tank, and when you combine it with the accuracy and the gun handling, it really works out very well. So in this particular game we are 2 tanks behind. I'm now down to 1.3k damage after taking that artillery round. We've only done 2.8k damage. I'm a little bit disappointed in this position, but we have managed to take out a few tanks with the help of our friendly team here. However, we are being flanked towards the north, so I'm going to head back, use the mobility to go and defend the base. And you can see here that the mobility isn't too bad going up hills. And this is the kind of thing that you do in this kind of tank. In a super heavy, you'd struggle to get back and you might want to push on towards their base, but I have the mobility in this tank to push forwards and go and defend the base. I don't want to rush in straight away because, like we just saw, there might be a little Death Star waiting behind a rock to absolutely wreck you. We snap a shell there at the Emil 2. It looked like it was going to go in, but there must have been some kind of cover in front of him that I couldn't feather with the reticle. And now it's all about just trying to get shots in where we can. This is a little bit risky against a Death Star trying to snap some shells into him, but it's a very dangerous target in a position that is stopping me from advancing over this ridgeline. I wanted to go over this ridgeline to create a sort of crossfire on tanks that are in the north. So I'm just going to wait here and pop out and get occasional shots into him when I can. It would have to be a very good shot off the Death Star to penetrate my cupola and finish me. And if he's firing Hesh, then I might take a big chunk of damage, but I'm willing to take that risk at this point in the battle because it is quite a close battle. And yeah, you never know what is going to happen next, so you definitely want to take your chances whilst you have got them. Our friendly EBR 105 takes out the Turan, which, yeah, very, very overpowered tank there, and now you can get it again, so there's plenty of them in the game. Very nice to get them out of the game when you can. They have no armour at all, which is their only biggest downfall. And yeah, like we said there, the Death Star was firing Hesh and only splashed our turret for a minuscule amount of damage, which is lucky for us that he didn't penetrate. But we have got at least one shot into him, and now it's time to head down the slope here and see if we can finish off this Emil 2. Our friendly Badger does the job for us, and we're going to advance towards our cap circle and see if we can use some of our vision to spot out towards the north, see if we can spot any tanks coming in. We have enough hit points to take, I'd say, 1 or 2 shots from most tanks left on the enemy team, so I'm feeling pretty confident at this moment. But our light tank dies, which is a bit of a disaster toward the end game. You always want to have the vision, the medium tanks or light tanks with the vision, to be able to spot for, you know, tank destroyers and the slower heavy tanks that don't have as good view range. So we're going to come around here, see if we can get some side shots into this Type 61 and also that Death Star that is a little bit further to the right that has just been spotted. I'm not sure if that was by me. He's now a one shot, so hopefully we're able to finish him off, and we're just going to wait for the perfect opportunity to fire and take him out. I'm reversing up here just to deter the artillery from looking at me. I know there is the new alert that you have, that when artillery is looking at you, obviously have that artillery symbol now, which is very handy indeed. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about it, but I always try and hug rocks and heavy tanks in brawling locations and choke spots because they're hot spots for artillery dumping grounds, and you definitely don't want to be taken out of the game. So our Type 5 Heavy just gets taken out, which is unfortunate for us, by one of the enemy artillery, who are going to be the bane of my existence in this game. We're going to have to be the aggressor in this sort of position. The Badger is a non-turreted British tank destroyer, tier 10 tank destroyer I should say. Doesn't have very good mobility at all. In fact, it has very poor mobility, so we're going to have to be the one getting the vision, using the mobility, and hopefully taking out the rest of the enemy team. I believe the Type 61 is low on health as well, so if I manage to get some shots in without being detected, I might be able to sneak up on the Death Star, but as luck would have it, the Death Star presents himself to us and we manage to take him out with a good shot in there. You don't have to aim very much in this tank. The aim time is absolutely tremendous, especially when you've applied your commander and equipment setup, and the accuracy and the gun handling feels so nice with this 130mm gun. That Type 61 must know I'm here. I'm expecting that Badger to go around to the left, so I'm going to go to a different position, see if I can catch the Type 61 out and see if I can find a shot on him to take him out. And with the 530 alpha damage, unless I roll extremely low, then I'm going to be able to take this Type 61 out. So you'll see me here just using the mobility, using the view range circle, remaining undetected, getting into crossfire situations, using the vision that my friendly tanks are putting out, and I'm putting this gun to work at mid to long ranges, which you definitely can do with this tank. Starting off the battle, supporting the heavy tanks, and now we are going round, getting some vision with our mobility, and we're fighting at mid to long ranges. So my intention now was to go straight for the artillery, take them out of the game first, take the RNG out. Unfortunately, it looks like this Stritzvarn 1030, I should say, has been disconnected or just given up in this battle. It means that we get detected, so he's actually done a disservice to me and a service to his team, which I suppose he should have been doing anyway actively. But it does mean that we managed to get some more assistance, an extra damaging shot, and we managed to take out that Type 61. And now it's me versus 2 artillery. Before the artillery buff, I'd be even more confident than I am now. But now they have crazy amount of hit points. I don't have the best DPM. I'm going to have to try and be a little bit clever about how I take this one down. So I'm going to try and just go in from this position, go down the sort of one line where I'm expecting the artillery to be towards the southwest part of the map, I should say. I really should learn how to speak. But I'm just going to be checking around these buildings in case the artillery have moved, and I should probably be going from building to building and sort of cover to cover in case I'm spotted out in the open, because I don't want to have 2 artillery shots rain in on me. Trying not to knock as many things over as I can, or as many big things over as I can, like trees, to not let the artillery know where I'm coming from. But we have to stop now to take our chance to get a shot in on this Batchat 15558. He fires 1 shell. He's now got a 10-second interclip reload, I believe, with a 6-round autoloader. We get 2 shells into him, and yes, the other artillery is hiding behind this rock, waiting to shotgun me. So I know he's a non-turreted artillery, so I use the mobility to get round the GW Tiger and finish off the Batchat 15558. And now it's about playing chicken. I can see that the GW Tiger is turning the opposite way. Now's my chance to go around, get 1 shot into him. I went for the tracks, tracked him in place, but he does repair. His engine is damaged, so I should be able just to zoom out. And what I should have done here is reverse up, get undetected, and then use my mobility to go forward around the rock, because then that wouldn't have happened. I should have just got undetected and been patient, and that was being greedy and not being patient enough at the end of the game, and it cost me this game. But we still had a decent result in this tank with a high caliber. Top of our team with 7.2k direct damage, 827 assistance, 5 kills, a profit with a revolt premium, even though we fired quite a lot of premium rounds in that game, and we blocked 780 damage. So that's it for this review or mini review of the Object 780. I think it's actually quite a good reward if you are patient with it, like I wasn't at the end of that game, and it should be golden. But that's it for this review. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.